What's going on, guys? And welcome to another edition of Stateside Footy. It's your boy Steve, and it is Friday night here on the podcast. And I got to tell you, man, it's been fantastic. MLSPA has come out with their salary figures for 2026, and we're going to go over who got the goddamn bag. Oh my God. I knew the spending was big. I knew the spending was outrageous in Major League Soccer. And of course, there's a lot of people saying we're not spending enough. We're not spending in right areas. Trust me when I tell you, Major League Soccer is spending. And we're going to go over who got the biggest bag. But you know what else is fantastic? If you guys would like and subscribe and also hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any upcoming Stateside Footy content, because we are getting close to 500. And, of course, I want to hit that before World Cup 2026. So all of that would be absolutely fantastic. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it because, man. Major League Soccer Players Association came out with a few days ago. I guess you can say their salary abstract, their salary matrix, whatever the case may be. What we know is that Major League Soccer, especially within the top, I guess you can say the top 10 spending teams, have easily cleared $150 million just in DP signings. Obviously, it's not including TAM, it's not including GAM, U22, homegrown, whatever the case may be. And it is absolutely freaking wild. All right, let's go ahead and get into it because in the DP category, the top 5 spenders are, of course, Inter Miami. Not a surprise. $41.845 million just in DP signings alone. And, of course, 28.3 of that goes to Leo Messi. And, of course, you have Rodrigo de Paul. And then I think, who is their third DP? Tadeo Lande, something like that. Doesn't necessarily matter. Checking in at number 2, Atlanta United. $16.692 million. And if you guys are checking in right now, Atlanta United is currently sitting 14th in the Eastern Conference. Checking in at number 3, LAFC, $16.092 million. And of course, LAFC is it's sitting in 5th in the Western Conference, not exactly having the year that they would hope. But that being said, when you're kind of looking, when you're looking at it a little bit across how they spend it, it's okay. I mean, $7 million in TAM, it's kind of high for TAM level players. 21% of their 21% of their salary. Okay, great. Checking in at number 4, the LA Galaxy, $15.668 million just on DP signings alone. 59% of their roster, more than half go, and of course it's more than half, 59%. Of course, come on, Steve, going just to the DP signings, and their TAM level is only 15% at 3.898. Checking in at 5, Nashville SC, $13.688, 60% of their roster going to the DP. And of course, they're atop the Eastern Conference by 2 points. The bottom 5, this is insane. The Colorado Rapids, $3.677 million. And Colorado currently sitting in 9th. Real Salt Lake, $3.55 million, which is only 23% of the roster. And they're sitting in 4th in the Western Conference. Minnesota United, $2.651, and they're currently in 6th. CF Montreal, 2.1, and of course they're down at the bottom. And of course, Philadelphia Union. Now this is crazy. The Philadelphia Union are only spending $847,000 on their DPs, which makes up only 7% of their entire roster. Where they spend the most on their roster is in general allocation money, $3.48 million. That's insane. By the way, Miami doesn't lead the TAM signings. That would be the Vancouver Whitecaps at 10.466, making up 43% of their roster. And their DPs are only at 8.827. So the discrepancy is actually kind of fascinating, really, when you get down to it. That there really is no correlation between how much you spend in DP versus where your place in the standing is. Because when you look at Inter Miami, where they don't spend is on general allocation money, $897,000, makes up only 2%, and they're homegrown, only 4%. Where they spend, obviously, is on DP and TAM, and all of that is situated in the essentially in the attack. I find it kind of interesting. Because for the narrative of whether or not Major League Soccer has the financial resources to compete, to potentially keep compete in a in a regional tournament such as CONCACAF Champions League, and of course now with the with the news that they're going to be invited down to Copa Libertadores in a couple seasons. What this shows is that there are teams that are committed to spending, teams that have no problem spending, but because of certain roster allocations, they choose to spend it in they tend to choose spend this thing higher up the pitch. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I just kind of find it interesting. By the way, Atlanta in TAM, by the way, Inter Miami checks in at second, 7.9 million. NYCFC 7.048, LAFC 7.014, Atlanta United $6.96 million. And then you get to Toronto, followed by Seattle, which is kind of interesting too, because Seattle is kind of an interesting team because their DPs are at 6.436 million. TAM is at 6.602, but then their general allocation money is 5.10. And so they are evenly spread across and sitting in third place in the Western Conference. I actually found that quite interesting, just considering how much I've talked shit about Seattle and their lack of spending. Well, they've certainly spent, but most of that are on existing contracts. But the point being is that when it comes to spending in Major League Soccer, there is no one particular right way to do it. Different teams have different systems in which they like to operate, and obviously we have seen different outcomes based on that spending. Just because you give a guy the bag doesn't mean that's necessarily going to translate in wins. The interesting thing about this is, let's go ahead and look at who is the DP leaders, which I actually find quite interesting. Leo Messi obviously has the bag, and this is actually kind of interesting because I did a deep dive on this one today. So total compensation for the 2026 season is $28.3 million, a base of $25 million. And by the way, it's a dude that doesn't talk to the media. That's a different, that's a different story. But he is MLS's top earner. And by the way, the base salary is a split, not just with MLS, but also total compensation are coming from various sponsors that are involved with the league. So the interesting thing about this is that he gets base paid for Major League Soccer, but he also gets a cut from viewership on the Apple TV deal. He is the only player. He is the only player that that has that type of deal with the league. Coming in second place, Sun Heung-min, LAFC 10.368. Not bad. Rodrigo de Paul, Inter Miami, 7.569. This is insane. Chucky Lozano, base salary of 6, but his total compensation is 9.3, and he's sitting on the bench this year. Miguel Almiron, 6.056. Emil Forsberg, 5.405. Sammy Surridge, 5.280. Ricky Puig, who's gets paid to rehab, 5.125. Jonathan Bamba of the Chicago Fire, $5 million across the board. Total compensation, 5.581. Heine Mukhtar, $4 million base salary, 5.411 after bonuses. Your boy Josh Sargent, new DP for Toronto, 3.210. Total compensation package, 5.265 million. That's insane. Thomas Muller, 5 million and 4 cents. That's actually kind of odd. 5 million and 4 cents. Interesting. Total compensation, 5.152. Alexei Moranchuk, 3.8 million. That's interesting. Charles Hill of New England, 4.5. Denny Bwanga, LAFC, 4 million. Evander, 3.2. Paintsil, Joseph Paintsil, 3.456. Facundo Torres, 3.360. My guy, Timo Werner, 3.738. And Miles Robinson checks in as the top-rated defensive DP at 3.5 million. Unbelievable. Unfreaking believable. Top goalkeepers. There are 2 DP goalkeepers right now in Major League Soccer. Roman Burkle of St. Louis City, 2.5. And our guy, Matt Turner, 1.76. That's insane. For our U.S. number 2 is getting paid essentially a little over $1.5 million. Andre Blake of Philadelphia gets $1 million. Zach Steffen gets $1.1 million. Patrick Schulte makes $900K. That's crazy. Washed up Sean Johnson gets $883,000. Dane St. Clair gets $745,000. Hugo Lloris, $800,000. Damn. That's crazy. The other DP center back in the league is Thiago Martins, $1.8 million. That's actually kind of interesting. Actually, no, there's another one. Justin Glad of Real Salt Lake, 1.150. Damn. Wow. All right, so here we go. Top midfielders. Ryan Gauld, 3.5. This is interesting. Like, this is spread across the entire league. Georgi Mihailovic gets 2.279 million. Unbelievable. Albert Rusnik, 2.68. Wow. And yeah. That's insane. But it just goes to show you that Major League Soccer doesn't necessarily have the money problem. It has a spending problem. And more importantly, what it does have is a spending problem in the wrong areas. Now, I'm not suggesting that, Major League Soccer does its thing by, giving defenders DPs or even, defensive midfielders, DPs. That's not exactly what I'm saying. But the interesting thing is there is a way where you can stay consistent by spending across the board in an even manner, where you do give yourself an ability to provide your team some depth, instead of what we're seeing across the league, where you have top heavy attacks and you have absolutely bargain basement defenses that really just aren't doing the job. Point in case, and I think this is actually kind of interesting, LAFC, who is kind of struggling this season, when you look at their defense, and this is actually kind of interesting, Aaron Long, Ryan Porteras, and Sergi Palencia, 2 center backs and a left back. 3 of them are TAM level deals, and 1 of them is a U22, and the rest are all general allocation money. By the way, 2 of them are making league minimum. Versus their attack, and you see 2 DPs, 1 TAM, 2 homegrowns, and then actually you see 2 TAM, 1 U22, 2 homegrown, and then one general allocation money. Their midfield is also the same: 3 TAM, 4 TAM, 1 general allocation, 2 U22s, 2 homegrowns. The money at LAFC is spent so far forward in the attack, and not enough on the defensive side, where you can kind of see where LAFC is a little, is struggling a little bit in that defensive side. But that being said, that's not their only problem this year. Their coaching has been god awful, but I digress. The interesting thing that I find with this entire experiment is that for years things have stayed relatively the same when it comes to the DP rules, when it comes to target allocation money. And what we have seen is a progressive spending in those 2 areas. But what Major League Soccer has not done has done the exact same thing on the defensive side of the ball. And a lot of this has to do with the parity. A lot of this has to do with the want of what Major League Soccer is looking for, which is ridiculous score lines. A lot of this is catered to the American sporting fan, because way back when Major League Soccer was going through its dark period, this is, before the expansion era, two of the biggest problems, that number one, that the fan experience was telling Major League Soccer and its television partners was that it was boring. Nobody wanted to watch a 0-0 draw. Nobody wanted to watch a 1-0 type of game. And so as certain things progressed, and of course, when David Beckham came over, we got introduced to the DP. And a couple years later, we also had the 3 DPs. 3 years later, we get target allocation money, and nothing has changed. The interesting thing, though, is quite honestly, the money has changed, because now we're starting to see $10 million players. We actually have our first $20 million player, but you're starting to see what was kind of common, which was that $3.5 million DP signing is now well over 5. I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but the more that this trend continues down this avenue, means that there's going to be less money for homegrown players. There's going to be less pathways for academy players. There's not going to be a lot of funds for those certain homegrown players that come onto the roster, absolutely kill it, and then all of a sudden, is there going to be a TAM spot, or is there going to be a DP spot open for them? Just out of curiosity, I want to check this real quick. Yeah, right now, Audrey Mehmeti is on a homegrown for the New York Red Bulls, is on a homegrown contract paying only $113,000 a season. By the way, Julian Hall, homegrown contract, $175,000 a season. Meanwhile, they're paying nearly $10 million for Emil Forsberg, Choupo-Moting, and Jorge Ruvlacabra as their 3 DPs. 2 of them are left wingers, by the way. That's actually kind of cute. And then, of course, a DP striker. But the interesting thing, though, is that when you're kind of looking at the numbers, a guy like Julian Hall has produced far better than one of the dudes that they're paying $3.2 million to. That's what that's what the dangerous proposition is going to be, because there are going to be European clubs that are going to be looking at this and saying, okay, cool. He's essentially making bargain basement wages. And this is an opportunity where we might be able to invade America for cheap, high-end talent. And what New York is going to have to force to do is reset the market value, because right now his market value is incredibly low. And usually what teams will do is they'll convert one of those DP spots into TAM, bring one of those players into a homegrown DP spot, resetting the market value. So when a team comes in for them, they're going to be able to get top dollar. And currently right now, for instance, I'm just throwing this out there. For instance, let's just say a team came in for a guy like Julian Hall. Well, they don't have any TAM. They don't have any available TAM. They don't have the space to give that DP contract out. And so from that standpoint, there's going to be a team that's going to be willing to come in and potentially give good value to get that player out the door. It's going to be interesting to see exactly how this one plays out. But the reality is that Major League Soccer has essentially broken their own DP spending records, and by a wide margin. What I find interesting about this is that one, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams use more than 50% of their resources on the DP spot. That's insane. A lot of teams are kind of in that 33 to 38%. Because they understand that they have other roster needs, right? That's the overlying issue, right? It's one of the biggest reasons why Miami's somewhat struggling this season, because they're not the same team. They don't necessarily have that. They don't have the ability to replace like for like with a guy like Jordi Alba or Sergio Busquets, so they struggled. It's actually kind of fascinating when you kind of look at this matrix and you're seeing it for what it is, and you're kind of looking at teams, the correlation to their spending, where they're at in the roster, where they're at in the table. Nashville's an interesting one. And this is kind of interesting though too, because 60% of their money is spent on the DP. And their next highest is general allocation money. Where they don't spend is in the TAM department. Only 12% goes to TAM level players, and they're sitting in first place. It's kind of interesting. the question is with that type of spending, does that leave them room in the summer? With the height of the winter window, getting ready for the start of the Major League Soccer season, did that leave them with enough room to potentially do what they need to do in the summer window? Are they stretched to the cap? That's the other thing, that what this tells me is that there is more than half the league that are going to be up against the cap for whatever reason, whether it's faulty contracts that they've given out, and whether or not some of these things were tied to these incentives were contract incentive that were tied to certain metrics, whether that's goals, whether that's minutes, and those players hit them, and all of a sudden it locked them into a contract, i.e. Jordan Morris. That's turning out to be a bad value contract for Seattle. His contract was tied to goals scored, and if he reached it, then his contract would automatically be converted into a DP. And the reason why Seattle did it was because Jordan has a history of injuries. Well, 2 years ago, he managed to stay healthy for much of the season, and he hit his goal threshold. It turned into a DP contract, and now he's injured again. And now Seattle can't move him. Right? So I'm sure there's contracts spread across the league that are tied to incentive, where the player hit it and now a team can't get off of it. And all of a sudden, they're cap tied. And it just goes to show you where Major League Soccer needs to improve. Because one of the things that it can't justify is the fact that, coming into the 2026 season, it came into the season with a $6.4 million salary cap. 6.4. Non-DP, of course, because DPs don't count against the cap. 6.4? There's teams that nearly double that, just in their TAM spending. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. And yet, what this shows me is that there are plenty of teams in this league, not just the top 10 teams in spending, but you go down through the top 20, more than half in this league that are willing to commit financially. More than willing to commit financially to, do whatever they need to compete for an MLS Cup, but can't. But absolutely can't, because there's two things holding them back. Number one, a salary cap, and number two, roster restrictions that essentially work as, communism, socialism. Everybody's got to be the same. But the problem is the outcomes are never really going to be the same, because if you have 10 teams that spend equally across four different roster variations, you're going to have outcomes that are going to be vastly different. But that's the whole point. That's the whole point behind these roster machinations. And the reality is that there's no wiggle room. And we saw that play out in the Champions League this year. We saw that play out this offseason coming into it. And there does not seem to be any change. There does not seem to be any change on the horizon as far as salary cap, potentially changing out the roster, changing out some of these roster rules to kind of get this thing moving in the right direction. I find it odd, man. I find it odd that we haven't had any significant roster rules since 2015. That seems, we're talking 10 years now. as this league has grown from what it was in 2015, which I believe it was like 20, it's grown by 10 more, 10 more teams. You would think that, the league would want to do itself a solid and kind of update some of these things as this league continues to move into the next generation. I don't know, man, because I actually think it's holding it back. That's kind of what I think. Because one of the things, all you have to do is like go on social media and you will find somebody that has an opinion on Major League Soccer. And from, the knocks of it's not a real league, it's a minor league, most of these players, can't hack it on a big level. And the truth of the matter is that because these teams are constructed in a manner of what they will, there's always going to be at least a good 10 players on a team that at best are squad players in this league, at best, that are getting starting minutes when quite honestly, they have no business getting those type of minutes. But that being said, it's like when a team has used all its resources in attacking positions and certain midfield positions, and all you really have left is general allocation money to fill out your goalkeeping position or fill out your defensive back four. There's only a certain level of player you're going to be able to afford at that stage. And so you're going to look around the league to see if you can pry out some of the better players in those financial spots. You're going to be checking free agency. Maybe maybe you're going to be looking to some youth players. Maybe you're looking in your own academy to see if there's a young kid that's willing to come up and facilitate a homegrown contract, whatever the case may be. And that's kind of where that's kind of where we're at. There is a wide discrepancy between attacks and defenses in this league. And when you see, like, what's funny is, there's these clips of Julian Hall and Audrey Mehmeti just scoring unbelievable goals. But the reality is, it's like, dude, if this was in a half competent league with good defenders, none of those goals would have been allowed. Like I think one of them was like a 30-foot screamer. And it's like, dude, nobody closed him down. It was absolutely ridiculous. I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, it's cool. And by the way, it's like good for clicks for Major League Soccer Online to have those type of goals. But in all actuality, there was no defense on the play. And I'm just kind of looking at it for what it is. And it's like, you can go to Europe in any of those mid leagues and you would never find defenses that would allow those type of goals. And of course the outcome of them, it's like, oh, they need to be on the national team. It's like, dude, calm the F down. No, they don't. Because at the international level, they're not going to be doing these things. Calm your roll. Slow your roll, calm down, and just understand what you're looking at in the moment and try not to overreact. Try not to overreact. Anyway, speaking of which, the funny thing is that we are getting very close to the roster announcement and the overreaction to Johnny Cardoso's injury and versus what the reality says it is. And then, of course, the fact that, a lot of people don't like Sebastian Berhalter or Christian Roldan, would rather see, some of these 17-year-olds. And it's like, listen, everybody overreacts in the moment, whether it's insanely good or if it's insanely bad. Like, I'll give you a good example. Like, Matt Turner had just a bad moment this last weekend for the New England Revolution. I mean, it was just a bad mistake. He was trying to move the ball with his feet, made a bad touch, and then immediately, the ball was taken out and the goals. The ball was taken off his foot and the goal scores. And it's like, I understand, yeah, it's a bad mistake, but that doesn't necessarily negate the season that he's had for New England Revolution. He's actually one of the best goalkeepers in the league. And, if you're kind of looking at numbers, I don't know if you guys are a numbers type of people, but some would suggest in certain areas that he's been actually better than Matt Freese in certain areas when it comes to the goalkeeping stats. But that being said, the eye test will tell you that Freese is probably the better goalkeeper. But the point is that Matt Turner has actually had a very good start to the season. But the overreaction was, we just don't have quality goalkeeper depth. And it's like, well, I wouldn't necessarily go that far. It's not as great as it was, but it's certainly not going to be a liability when it comes to the World Cup. Just like the injury to Johnny Cardoso wasn't team altering, because the reality was he hasn't been playing consistently at Atletico Madrid. It's been up and down, and his national team form has been god awful. But the idea is, because we're reacting in the moment to two young players that play for the Red Bulls, it's like all of a sudden these guys have to be on the World Cup roster. It's like, slow your roll, man. Pump your brakes. Number one, they're 17 years old, and they're doing it against some of the worst defenses in the world. There has to be context to this. There has to be context. And if we're just going to say some crazy ass shit, you're going to get a lot of people that are going to believe it. Nobody wants to hear the sane, rational explanation, because it's not click worthy. I wish I had it in me. I swear to God, I wish I could. I wish I could do the things that some of those content creators can do. I just don't have it in me to lie to people or, engage in hyperbole. It's just not my forte. I just can't do it. Which is probably why my subscriber base is where it's at. But, the reality of the matter is, it's like, when I look at this team, I don't see a team that's going to crash out in the group stage. I see a team that's probably going to do what we've always done. It's going to be good enough to get out of the group, but as far as making deep runs, in order for that to happen, there's going to have to be incredible luck and timing. That's it. And that's the truth, man. That's the truth behind it. There's a reason why we've only advanced past the round of 16 once, and it was because we just got lucky with the draw. We happened to catch Mexico in the round of 16, and I don't think that'll ever happen again. So eventually, we're going to have to beat one of those teams, and as long as Major League Soccer continues to endorse the attitude that it's okay to spend more than $150 million on DP signings, and again, another $100 million in TAM contracts, the pathways into the first team are not going to be available for forward players. I would like it if Major League Soccer was a true American sellers league. But really, the pathways really are at potentially goalkeeper. The pathways are, along the defensive back four, except our defensive prospects aren't really great. We're not seeing a lot of upward movement when it comes to the defense. We're kind of seeing it at midfield a little bit. That's cool. And with the occasional forward player, like a guy like, Julian Hall, and maybe a guy like Gozo. But the reality is, it's like, you look across the league, and there's a reason why, a team like the New York Red Bulls will do it. But Inter Miami is not going to, you know bring a striker prospect through their academy to get significant minutes in the first team. Not when they're competing for trophies. That shit's never going to happen. Same thing at LAFC. Like, I don't understand why these teams even have academies, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. Like, if I was in charge of both of those teams, like, those academies would be profit centers. I would be churning out high level prospects, potentially getting them loan moves if possible, putting them in the shop window and selling them. Because if the priority is winning trophies, then I'm not giving pathways to young kids. That's just certainly not going to happen. But other teams in the league have different priorities. It's interesting, man. The dichotomy between teams in this league that are trying their damnedest to win trophies, and teams that are, it's weird, right? I don't want to say not, but teams that that's a good way to, okay, fine. Teams that are not. Because let's be perfectly honest, there's plenty of teams in this league that take a hard look at the mirror and take a hard look at themselves in the mirror and will say, at best, maybe a good year is getting into the playoffs. But we're not going to be challenging for top honors. So what are we doing? What is the plan? What is the focus on for the season? Are we going to, give a bunch of minutes out to youngsters? Well, if that's the case, then, let's go ahead and bring in a coach that has that in his locker, that has that on his CV, that has player development on his CV. The crazy thing is we're not even seeing that either. That's probably one of the more insane things that's happening in Major League Soccer. I don't know, man. Like, I look at Major League Soccer as an ass backwards league. I just look at it as a league that just doesn't have its priorities straight. I don't know what it wants to be, because on some years you'll actually see good player movement overseas, and then other years you don't see it at all, and you see heavy spending, and it almost feels like they're getting like a dip. It feels like when they do heavy spending, it's because they have like a dip in engagement. And I think that's also true, because I think Don Garber kind of let that out of the bag as well too. That a lot of their roster decisions is based on engagement. He actually said that. That's actually kind of funny, now that I think about it. It's just a weird league, man. It's just a weird ass league. And it's not a surprise that, in the United States, it's not even the most, watched league. That's the funniest thing. But I digress. Listen, guys, we're going to be back tomorrow. I think we have a couple things lined up tomorrow, as I will have Dave Harris from the Irish Hotspur on tomorrow, as we talk a little bit about Spurs as we are getting close. We only got a couple more match weeks left in the season, and of course they are a couple points above the relegation line as they head to Stamford Bridge to take on Chelsea before finishing out the season at home against Everton. So we will talk a little bit about that with Dave Harris. Then, of course, tomorrow night it is the MLS live stream, and I think I'm going to do Seattle versus LA. I think that is going to be although, I don't know, New England, Minnesota looks pretty good. We have the New York Derby. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think I'm going to do Seattle versus LA Galaxy. I haven't done a Sounder match in a while. So that's what we're going to do. And then on Sunday, I'm going to come back and I think I'm going to do my final roster prediction. I'm going to release my 2026 World Cup roster. And I don't think it's going to be that big of a surprise to anyone. That's the thing. It's like there's not really going to be that many roster battles. Mauricio Pochettino let fly that, his provisional roster has already been submitted. And I would probably assume there's not going to be, too many surprises on that roster. So from that standpoint, I'm going to release it because we are just like about a week and a half away from the official roster release. And it's going to be interesting to see exactly who made that final cut. I don't think there's going to be any surprises. I think, I think with certain injuries, I think, certain players that most people probably wouldn't want on it are going to be there, but it's not going to be a surprise if they are because, again, the national team isn't just your best collection of your European-based players. It's not an all-star team. It is the group of the best 26 players that fit together. And through his 18 months in charge, he has, put together a group of 60 players that he trusts. And, from that, we're going to see exactly who we all think we're going to see. There's not going to be any surprises. So that's going to be coming up on Sunday. So it should be fun. I'm going to thank everybody for tuning in. I certainly hope that you guys enjoy your Friday evening. And quite honestly, I hope you guys have a great weekend. I will be back tomorrow, so it should be fun. I will see you then. Take care, guys. Have a good night.
Rusted goalposts under fading skies.